What's up guys, it's Billy from Electric RVA. Today we're doing a full Moxin controller install on a Surron Light B. This video is going to be long, it's going to be extensive, but it tells you everything you need to know to get your controller mounted and working in your Surron Light B. This video is not a tuning video. That'll be the next video. I'll show you how to tune it and get everything working without any cutouts. We are an authorized Moxin dealer, and one of the perks of buying a Moxin through us is that you get support, a phone number that can support you, and if you have any questions or need help with anything, you can call that number and we will help you as much as we can. So let's get into the video. It's going to be long, bear with it, skip through it if you need to, but it'll get a Moxin installed and working on your bike by the end of the video. You're going to want to unplug everything that goes behind the ignition cover, as well as the ignition and USB port. That includes the Sport Eco switch, your LCD display, your headlight, your brake sensors. We're going to end up removing the whole stock wiring harness. So your tail light needs to come unplugged. There's 2 pins on the left side that need to come unplugged. You're going to want to end up removing these bolts out of the front battery plate. Your skid plate bolts, remove the skid plate completely and start working on removing the controller. Next, go ahead, undo all the bolts that hold the controller in. It is easier to access these top controller bolts if you remove your front fender. Remove the top bolts out of your controller. You will also need to disconnect your horn while you're up here. Once those top bolts are out of the controller, you can pull this battery tray backwards, and you'll need to snip all the zip ties that hold the stock battery or the stock wiring harness in, and disconnect the controller from the bike's wiring harness. And on your stock controller, you have your motor phase wires and your negative and positive battery leads. Before you disconnect these battery leads, turn your ignition on to drain any residual power that may be in the controller. You may have to plug your ignition back in if you didn't do that prior. Go ahead and remove all your phase wires from the controller. And your stock controller is out. You have connections for your kickstand sensor, your throttle, and your hall sensor. Snip that zip tie. And get access to these connectors. You'll want to disconnect all of them. For your battery lid, there's a 3mm Allen screw right here that holds this harness that runs back to your taillight in. You need to remove that screw. There's also 2 3mm Allens that hold this plastic plate on. You need to remove those to get this wire out. After you've got that plate removed, come back to your tail light, make sure it's unplugged, and just under the subframe you'll see the wires. You can pull these out and then pull them through the front. After unplugging the battery supply plug, you can completely remove your stock harness. I'll just run through all the connectors very quickly so you can scroll back to this if you get confused and need to know what connector does what. This little gray box is your DC converter or your buck converter. This changes 60 volts down to 12 volts for your headlight. This top connector coming out of the stock motor is your hall sensor. These are your phase wires, negative and positive battery leads. The throttle is a triangular connector. The kickstand sensor is another triangular connector. This one is male. Your throttle is a female. The brake sensors will not end up being used, nor your Sport Eco mode switch. So this will be gone. Brake sensor will be gone. This is your headlight. And this is used for your LCD screen, which will also be gone. So the headlight is the only thing you'll end up having left before you put your Moxin on the front, and your throttle runs down to the bottom of the bike. This red and green wired connector that comes off of your battery harness is 60 volts. That will end up plugging into the Moxin. That needs to stay on there. Inside of your Moxin box, you're going to find a user manual. This has tons of good information, pinouts, how it should be set up, protection instructions for over voltage, under voltage, temperature protections, motor self-learning, wheelie mode tuning instructions. Definitely give this a good read before you just jump into it and try to tune it yourself. It goes over setting your controller angle to 0, critical fault troubleshooting, so it lets you know what each fault means, instructions on how to save your settings in the LCD, technical specifications for different controllers. Definitely give it a good read. It has a lot of good information in here. Most of your questions can probably be answered through that. In the box, you're going to find a bunch of stuff. A Hall to encoder adapter, your left combination switch. This is your 12 volt harness. This puts power to your headlight, your tail light, your horn, and a few other things. It's got a horn switch and your headlight switch. This is going to be your right handlebar controls. You'll have the LCD display itself, your regen thumb throttle, GPS power supply. In the United States, not required. The European bikes do have GPS in them. That will supply power to that. Phase and power wire protection covers. This also has hardware and tools in here for you to install the controller. And your LCD mounting bracket. And then, of course, the controller itself. Nixwow or Moxin. What I like to do before installing the Moxin is tape up all these wires. It makes cable management much easier. If things are going to run through the top, I'll group all of those together. If they're going to run towards the bottom of the bike, I'll group all of those together. Moxin does tape up a little bit, not as much as I like, just to keep it organized. But running towards the bottom of the bike, you're going to want your encoder / hall sensor plug, your DC converter and kickstand power cut plug, and your throttle grip plug. Running towards the top of the bike, you're going to want your LCD display plug, your left combination switch plug, right combination switch plug, linear electric brake plug, which is your regen throttle, your ignition switch and 12 volt output will also run up towards the top of the bike. These are going to be in the middle. Battery supply plug, that plugs into that plug on your battery harness. So those kind of stay in the middle. All your combination switch LCD screen will run towards the top. Everything else will run towards the bottom. So I'm going to go ahead and tape all of these up and just make it a little bit neater and cleaner. After that, we're going to move on to the bars. So you're going to want to remove your Sport Eco horn switch as well as the display. Everything else on here can stay. Your throttle's obviously going to need to stay, but I'll show you how to get the display on and mounted up. I'm going to end up taking these bars off of this bike, so my mounting solution won't be permanent, just to show you for the video. This is the bar mount. They send you a variety of bolt lengths. The bigger bolts are if you have wider bars. The smaller bolts is if you're running like a 7/8 bar. But essentially you would you would put those two pieces onto your bar. Quick tip, just thread the first one in a little bit, then get the second one in and alternate your tightening pattern on them. You would end up peeling off the top layer of that double-sided sticky tape and set your display on it and it'll stick. It is super, super strong, and it does act as some vibration resistance, but you get about one shot, so make sure you got it in the right place. Your left and right switches will go on the left and right side of your handlebar. This is the right switch, so this will end up going right here. This fitting on the back unscrews and allows the two halves to separate. And there's a 3mm Allen at the top that you'll have to take off, and then it will separate and you can put it on your bar. They do include all the tools in the package to put the handlebar and install a controller, so that is super nice. This is what it will end up looking like. Ignore these buttons, those are for lights. So you have your right hand control panel over here with your headlight switch on the back, your left hand control panel with your wheelie dial, and then your regen brake right there. And your screen will of course mount in the middle, or wherever you choose. You can mount it on the sides with the provided screws, but that's what it'll end up looking like. And we'll move on to the 12-volt harness, which will run your lights and tail light. It's all labeled, so tail light's going to be this long one that'll end up running to the back of the bike. This will all need to stay up front. This is your headlight. This goes to the right hand control, which is your headlight switch. This was your horn switch, which will go to your left-hand control. You've got USB power and your horn. So let's get that on. To get your tail light wires ran correctly, you'll need to take off this bottom plastic piece. There are 3 little clips on the sides, and then there's also 2 clips on the inside. Oh, let me see if I can get it to focus. On the inside, you'll have to remove all 8 of those. Then this plastic will come down. Then there's 4 bolts that hold the seat on. Let's go ahead and take those off. This is one of those clips. You'll need to get a small flathead screwdriver or a pick and get under this top part and pull it out just a little bit. Then you will be able to pull the whole clip out. And you can kind of see where it went. There's a hole right there. Remove all of those. After you've gotten all those clips removed, you can pull on this plastic cover and it'll come right off. You can see the holes where those clips were. And set this to the side. This will actually give us enough room to run those wires without removing the seat. I'm gonna run them and show you how I ran them. So these are just loosely ran, but you can see it run to the right of your seat lock if you're looking towards the back of the bike. And that wire will have to run behind the cover that goes right here, just like the stock. And it goes over that little piece of metal and ends up coming out of the side of the piece of plastic and will connect to your tail light directly. All right, so after putting the plate back on, this wire that runs to the tail light goes back up underneath the plastic, pops out right behind the tail light and plugs into it. On the same harness, your horn connection is there, horn, and you run that through the hole and connect it to your horn. Your right and left hand controls, as well as your LCD cables, you'll want to run through the forks right here, and they'll end up going under the ignition cover and into this space right here. These wires will end up sitting in this space right here as well. Next, we're gonna get all the phase wires and the battery cables connected to the controller. Moxin sends you these phase wire covers. These are the phase wire covers. Just throw them on their color, so green on green. Black for your battery connection. Blue phase. yellow phase, and red for your positive. And they do send bolts for your phase wires and the battery connections. The correct setup is the bolt. You're gonna put your lock washer on first and then your flat washer. So the lock washer will be touching the head of the bolt. I like to use the Moxin box to hold the controller while I do this. The phase colors do not matter whether they go on U, V, or W on the controller. You can put them in any order, it does not matter. I end up putting the longest one on the farthest one away and putting the shortest one on the closest one. You want to make them snug, but don't crank down on them. So just a little extra turn, and that is good. And we'll move on to the power. The power side gets a little more difficult because you need to prop the controller up. I'll end up just propping it on the front wheel. And B negative is your negative or your black battery cable. B positive is your positive or red battery cable. So we'll just go ahead and get these mounted up. And that is your negative and positive done. Now that you've got your battery cables and your phase wires connected, we're gonna start working on the actual harness itself. So I spaced mine out. This will end up going to the top, up there. This will end up being running down below where your stock throttle connects down here. These will stay in the middle. This one will go to the top with your 12-volt output and ignition switch. And these will also run down to the bottom. I'm going to start with the hall sensor plug. This is the top bung on the stock motor. Find your plug that says encoder/hall sensor and go ahead and just plug it up. So this does not fit. So Moxin sends you an adapter that allows it to be plug and play and changes the connector. Since we'll be needing this, I'm going to tape these wires up just to make it look a little bit better. All right, so I got that taped up. We'll get this plugged in. And if I can get it the right way. So I have a hall sensor, encoder/hall sensor plug on the Moxin. Boom, that's good, easy peasy. And this is my throttle. So we're just gonna take that and plug it into the throttle plug on the Moxin harness. Done. Throttle and hall plugged in. We'll tuck those kind of back into the stock location. On the other one that I have running towards the bottom, DC converter and kickstand cutoff power. DC converter, we are going to plug that straight in, easy, and we're going to take the kickstand sensor and plug this straight in, easy, and that will get tucked up behind your phase wires as well. So that's all you need to do on the bottom, nothing more. Let's go ahead and mount the bottom of the controller to the brackets right here, and then we can start running these wires up towards the top. Moxin does not send you controller mounting hardware, so you will need to use your stock hardware to mount the controller. All right, so now both of the bottom bolts are loosely in there. You can move this just a tiny bit, but you'll want all of your cables that are running to the middle or the top of the bike to be accessible and already behind the controller. So while we're here, we're gonna need to plug in the battery power supply plug. So this is a plug that's on your battery harness and comes off of your battery harness right here. Let's go to the other side. This battery sends 60 volts and connects into the battery harness. So your battery supply plug is going to plug into that. I didn't get this part on video, but you'll need to pull your 12 volt output and ignition switch up, and your other cables, the combination switches, up behind the ignition cover, and close your battery plate. And then you'll need to throw your bolts in the top controller mount. When you're fitting these top bolts, it gets a little tight. You're just gonna have to move the wires and play with it until you can get it close and get those top bolt threads to catch. But they will. You can make it fit. It's not too terribly hard. I've got to take this bracket off and run these cables behind it, but then we can tighten up the bottom bracket bolts. So I got the skid plate thrown back on. Now all of our wires are right here, and we can start throwing on the handlebar controls. This is the right combination switch that also has the headlight. So we'll need to find our right combination switch connector and the headlight connector and just plug it in. I went ahead and fitted the controller guard that goes across the bottom and the sides. I'm gonna get the skid plate thrown back on, and then we can start plugging in the top 12 volt harness and all the handlebar controls. The headlight switch connector on the right combination switch is on your 12 volt harness. So you'll have to plug the 12 volt harness into the right combination switch. And now we can move on to the left combination switch and plug it into the left combination switch connector. And this also has your horn. So it will also plug into your 12 volt harness for your horn switch. Got the left one connected. Now we're gonna plug in our regen thumb throttle. Same thing, find the connector in here, plug it in. Same thing with the LCD. And don't forget to run your wires through your forks. I forgot, so you'll have to do that. After you've got your display plugged in, you have just a few plugs left. Your ignition switch, your 12 volt output. The 12 volt output will plug into your 12 volt harness. Your headlight will also plug into the 12 volt harness. Your USB port will plug into the 12 volt harness, and just plug your ignition in, and then your controller is fully connected. And that's your Moxin completely mounted, except for mine. I haven't set up the bars yet, waiting on a new set of bars before I throw everything on. Completely mounted. We can go ahead and test it now. We'll throw the battery in, get it connected, and see if it powers on. And we'll get the bike powered on. Your screen should come on. Now, we still have to do some tuning. In my next video, I'll show you how to tune it, get everything set up. You can see the voltage is 65 volts, which is almost a full battery. But our battery is dead, it says. We don't have motor temperature, everything's in Celsius. We got some work to do in the tuning side before we can run the bike. But that is how to get your Moxin controller installed on a 24 or older light bee. For 2025s, there's an extra step. There's a BMS plug that needs a special harness to allow the battery to power the Moxin without the stock controller and activate the BMS, just like the E-Ride Pros need the BMS activation key for it to work on an E-Ride Pro. But you got it installed. I'll go ahead, connect this battery, flip the breaker. So just show you, horn works. We will test the light switch. Light switch works. Our mode buttons work. Changes the gear amperage. And if you hit the regen, it goes into regen.